Good afternoon. There are very few things better than having the slot right after the lunch break. For those of you who are here, I'm very grateful because this is also part of what I want to talk about a little bit today, which is you guys. So, if you look at the headlines and all the things that people talk about these days, is AI, no surprise, VR and metaverse. But I have a very controversial, maybe not that controversial opinion, which is I very much believe that the future is offline. A question that I would love for you to take away, even if you don't remember anything from this presentation, is the question is, what do you think is the humanity's comparative advantage against machines? So for those of you where economics has been a while, just a quick explanation what comparative advantage means. So comparative advantage is not absolute advantage. The analogy I always use is imagine, for those of you who follow soccer, so Manuel Neuer is a very famous German football player who's a goalie, arguably the best, but he's also a very, very good field player. So imagine him and I will play on the same team. He'll be better than me in all aspects. He's a better field player and a better goalie. But I'm terrible at being a goalie, but I'm decent as a field player. So if we were to play in a team, I would play on the field and he would be goalie because comparatively I'm better on the field than in the goal. So short story of what comparative advantage means, and I really want you to think about, because this is a question I've been thinking about a lot, right? As machines come, as AI develops, as we're building a platform for experiences, what is really the comparative advantage that humans can have over machines? Before I try to give some of the answers, maybe a quick background on why are we standing here, why am I standing here, and what gives me maybe a little bit of the right to talk about experiences and talk about offline. So this is a picture from, obviously, very recently. This is a picture from 2007 of the founding team of GetYourGuide. So the founding story of GetYourGuide was when Johannes, who is the guy in the beautiful red shirt, and I were traveling to Beijing, which is where I'm originally from, and we were part of a student conference, and he booked his flights wrong, arrived a day too early, and was totally lost. When I came, of course, the food was better, the people were suddenly friendly, and everything was half price. And so this is where we discovered the power of having a local connection, having a local friend. And this is how we started the idea of GetYourGuide, of initially it being a platform where you could book local travel experiences, but it developed now into a platform where we really connect travelers and locals to unlock unforgettable travel experiences. We've had the privilege of being in a very, very big market. So the broader experience economy, many people have estimated to be about $1 trillion. So there are very, very few trillion-dollar industries in the world. You have energy, you have a couple other things, military, and then, of course, experiences, which is arguably the most joyful out of the trillion-dollar industries. And the travel experience market itself is pegged at about $300 billion. Now, lots of entrepreneurs will say, well, we're just great executors. I think some others would also admit that they've been lucky. And one of the things you have to get lucky about is the macro market and some tailwinds and trends and get the timing right. One thing that we've been very, very lucky about is that we rode the tailwind of the experience economy. So, there's been a couple years ago this New York Times article saying how, not only millennials, but really everyone valuing experiences over things. And this is a trend that keeps on giving. In addition, we've had the benefit of vast digitization of which was previously a very offline industry. I think one of the best proof points that people crave human experiences, offline experiences, in-person experiences, has been COVID. So up until 2019, we had beautiful growth. February 2020, our year-on-year growth from February 2019 to 2020 was about 100%. Wow, best February in a very long time. Obviously, March, revenue went to zero. That was not so fun. 2 years was quite tough. And then there was the question is, would people come back and travel? And what we've seen has been an incredible rebound because, people, there was the question, people were saying, hey, you guys were doing real-life experiences. Why don't you do virtual experiences, right? So kind of, do virtual tours. You can virtually tour Rome. Why don't you develop a VR app? Why don't you do all of those things? And we always said no to all of those for two reasons. Number one, we firmly believed in the value of in-person, real offline experiences, because there's a difference between seeing things through a VR lens, no matter how good they become, to taking the arduous travel to get there, smelling, touching, and eating all these incredible flavors of different countries. And the other thing is, of course, that our job to be done was not to do tours, but our job to be done as a business is connection between somebody who's from somewhere to another destination, another place that is foreign. So our job to be done is about unlocking that, and it's not about doing offline or online tours. I think another interesting point when we talk about broader experiences and connections, which is really the theme of the importance of offline, is I think you all know about the pandemic, that is loneliness. So a significant amount of people in the European Union are lonely. This is only increasing. And the other one is, of course, polarization, which is rampant and a problem. And so the question becomes, what can you as leaders in the digital space do? I have two beliefs what is necessary. The first one is, yes, sounds obvious, is to create community. So when I was referring to, thank you for being here, is you showing up and having the presence is a key part of building community. One thing that we do as a business is we try to build a community of travelers, so people who travel, but more importantly, we're trying to build a community of experience creators. So be it, we have a guy in Dubai, and he moved from Egypt to Dubai 10 years ago, and he started with one car. And through our other community and learning from other experience creators and tour operators, he's now building incredible businesses where he has 500 cars and is the biggest operator for desert safaris, for example. So community has an incredible power for learning and also really to build incredible businesses. The other one is about building worlds. And I had a very telling experience when I recently went back to Shanghai just 3 weeks ago. And I haven't been there for 5 years because, well, China was locked down and nobody could get in. And I was talking to a tour guide. He was a local from Shanghai who was giving an absolutely incredible food tour. So if you ever go to Shanghai, check it out. Quick story. So he has these 20 spots that he can go to. And depending on who you are, he will pick the 5 spots to go to. So we first had a conversation, and I mentioned casually that I like to drink, and he said, okay, great, we start with a pub crawl, and you can taste the incredible craft beers of Shanghai, and then we eat the food. So just one example of this is something you cannot replicate in the online world. Anyway, so what he was telling me, which was a stark reminder of walls and worlds, is he said, for the last 5 years, you have an entire generation of Chinese people who didn't have a single foreign exchange students on campus. And vice versa, you have an entire generation of university students, 3 years, right, freshmen all the way to graduation, that didn't have the chance to go abroad. So you have an entire generation of future leaders who did not get to experience what it means to connect to a different culture, a different nationality. And so I think this is just a reminder of how important it is to build these worlds, not walls. I want to show you a quick video of something that exemplifies a little bit of what we're trying to do when it comes to building connections. So if we can play the video. So one thing we realized in Japan is that everybody knows about Mount Fuji, about dreams of sushi with Jiro and all these blockbuster things. But what we really wanted to do is to connect travelers a little bit more with the hidden gems and going below the surface and build real connections. So we actually ventured into the woods of Kyoto and its surroundings and found these Shinto priests and found these mask makers who've been doing masks for over 100 or 200 years in multiple generations. And we've built these, what we call GetYourGuide original experiences, where we really connect travelers not only with the well-known things, but really with these people behind those stories to build these incredible experiences. So now, of course, it doesn't take a travel company in order to build on the comparative advantage of humans. So there are 3 things that I want to leave with you, including 3 examples from my life of how I live it. The first one is presence. Recently, I was having a meeting with a couple of people, and one of the feedbacks that I got is, Tao, you weren't very present. Okay, fair feedback. What do I do with it? And then I asked one of my mentors, and he was a guy who's been working for Jeff Bezos for 15 years, used to run their international business. And he said, one of the things that you may not recognize is when you have a meeting with some of these folks, they see you maybe once a year, maybe twice a year. So every time they have a meeting with you, it's unique, it's special. And the biggest gift that you can give them is your presence. So I always thought I was good at meetings, but that was a very, very good reminder, I think, for all of us about the question of presence. So one thing I now do is I don't take my laptop to meetings, just pen and paper, and really focus. And if it's not an important meeting, just cancel it. But really trying to live more presence and forcing the habits through constraints such as pen and paper versus digital. The other thing is real talk, real change. So I'm part of a I'm going to call it a self-help group. It's called YPO. So it's a bunch of people who meet, once a month, 8, 9 people, and you talk about, these are, other business leaders, but you mostly talk about personal issues, family issues, relationship issues, and those kind of things. And there is a very clear script by which you go through this. So these are people who, run multi-million-dollar businesses, manage hundreds of people. But the script by which we do it, in order to drive change within us, the first question is, describe the situation and how you're feeling about it. So it takes a bit of practice. So, you talk about something, and then it takes actually a lot of, especially the first time, it takes a lot of resistance to say, this is what happened, and my feeling is shame, or my feeling is fear. So going through the motions of this, talking about feelings and then talking about actually the issue is incredibly powerful and leads to significantly more change. So I've now tried this method also in business settings. So the first time I had a meeting with 2 people who had a conflict, I gave them the script and said, you have to talk about feelings. They're looking at me like I'm an alien, right? And so, but it really works because you suddenly discover things that you didn't think was possible. So one person said, I feel, first he didn't say, I had to force it a little bit, but he said, the core feeling I have is a lack of trust. I feel not trusted by you. I feel like you don't trust me. And the other person was very surprised because he said, it wasn't never a matter of trust. I feel something else. And so we made real progress. So key takeaway really is, again, this is something that humans can do, not only because machines aren't capable of simulating emotions, but you don't believe them. Right? So reciprocity is really the key here. So in presence and emotions, the belief that the other person on the other end that you see and feel and touch has those same emotions, has the same presence, is really a key comparative advantage that I think we can have over machines. And last but not least, I think, is about exploration and empathy. My story here is, a couple years ago, I went on a tour in Jerusalem. So for those of you who haven't been, absolutely amazing, one of my favorite places to visit. And being born in China, but having mostly grown up in Europe, you have a very clear opinion of they have some issues there, and it should be obvious this is the solution, right? Whatever you might think the solution might be. Now, after spending a week there and speaking to lots of locals, and with an amazing tour guide who in Jerusalem took us to these back streets, we talked to rabbis, we talked to imams, we talked to some local families who lived just on the border. I mean, to be fair, Jerusalem is pretty small, so it's like Prenzlauer Berg the size, right? So it's not that big. And so everything is very, very closely together. And just having these conversations, after 1 week, my main takeaway about this entire conflict in the region and all the complications is that it's very, very complicated. Now, I didn't walk away with a clear understanding of the solution, but built a lot of empathy. And I think very, very similar to my story earlier about China, which is a situation I'm much more closely to. So, of course, one thing is you can talk about geopolitics and realpolitik and all those things, but unless we can build the empathy because you have spent time there or somebody else has spent time there, I think it's going to be very, very hard to build this empathy and the emotions to then get to solutions and true change. And so, yes, if you can apply, but okay, this is the last slide. So I just want to leave you again with the thought of the future is offline, not because I think that there is no value in digital or tech, but because I think really about the comparative advantage that we have and should continue to build on are things like presence, are things like community, are things like emotions and empathy, because this is an area we are particularly strong at and where we can drive real change. So hope you enjoyed that, and thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Tao. Remember that, can we put on the Slido, please? So we have a few minutes for questions. We have one that just popped in, but in the meanwhile, you can scan that code or slido.com, enter the code TOA23. We have one question so far that says, Tao, what comes after the experience economy?
After the experience economy, well, you mean after there are no, I mean, I think there's a lot of, if you have no more experiences, then we're all dead, right? So I think there's no after. But there is a lot of other interesting and exciting industries. You know, I personally still think there's a lot of opportunity, particularly when it comes to when it comes to relevant industries, right? Obviously, energy is going to be big, AI is going to be big, all these things are going to be big. But what I hope will emerge as an even more important industry is especially around revolutionizing education. So, you know, in a way, the current education system was built based on the Industrial Revolution, right? Automation of jobs, specialization, you know, and all that stuff. So given the current changes, right, how will education adapt in order to build the next, you know, generation based on changing environments? So I think this will be a very exciting, hopefully a very exciting sector.
Wonderful. We have one more. What is your, from Holger, Holger Koch, what is your AR strategy?
Yeah, great question. So we don't have an AR strategy per se. The way we look at technologies, we challenge all teams to think about how can you leverage whatever technology is out there or technology you have to build to solve a customer problem. And so one of the customer problems we have sounds trivial, is to find meeting points. So imagine you booked a tour to the Vatican, huge, millions of people. How do you find exactly your personal tour guide? So one of the Hack Day projects that we've done is to use AR to overlay, and then you have an arrow pointing to the person. So that's, I think, more a tactic that we've deployed. But this is, I think, exactly where there's interesting ways to also do maybe audio guides with apps where you can overlay reality with what you see.
All right, I think we have time for one more. Let's see, without getting Tao. This is a long question, so if you have more questions, by the way, Tao, if you can meet him outside in the tables if you have maybe a few minutes. If you
buy me a beer, I answer a question.
Exactly, that's a good one. If you can answer quickly, what's your main advice when it comes to traveling and experiencing these places?
It's not a small question. I think it starts with the mindset, right? I mean, I can give you a bunch of tips of websites to use and apps to use, but it's really about the mindset, right? So I think that the main difference, and so in our marketing strategy, we target a certain persona that we call the modern explorer. The modern explorer for us wants to learn more. They don't just want to stand in front of, I don't know, insert famous monument, take a selfie, post on Instagram, say, look at me. But we want them to learn about the place and learn about the people, the history, building a deeper connection, right? So I think those are the most rewarding travels where you allow yourself to discover. Maybe not everything planned, depends on the vacation, but I think having a growth mindset when traveling, I think leads to the most fulfilling journeys.
Absolutely. Tao, thank you so much. See you next year, hopefully.
Yeah,
Big round of applause.